Now, the much anticipated Cabinet Lekgotla is set to get underway tomorrow. Well, joining us in studio is SABC News political reporter Samkele Maseko, senior reporter, I might add. Samkele, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us. So, with all the developments that we've seen, we see the GNU slowly taking shape, and of course, all the questions that we've been asking, we've all been referenced and referred to. Wait until the Cabinet Lekgotla. What exactly is going to take place there, Samkele?
It's going to be rather interesting because no political party has held a Lekgotla to discuss their program of action for this term of office of this particular administration. Normally, with the governing African National Congress, the Cabinet Lekgotla is preceded by an NEC Lekgotla. This time around, no NEC Lekgotla took place. There is no mandate that is coming from Luthuli House and that is going to Mahlambandlovu, to the president of the country, or to the West Wing at the Union buildings to give him the line of march. So essentially, the president of the ANC is without a mandate going towards this Cabinet Lekgotla from the governing party's perspective, as we have come to know the governing party when it comes to issuing of mandates to the executive, that a provincial Lekgotla of an executive in a provincial government is preceded by a Lekgotla of the PEC of the ANC. One would also assume that this Cabinet Lekgotla that is taking place would be preceded by normally an ANC-NEC Lekgotla. But since we are in the GNU days, it seemingly looks like the ANC has decided for government to proceed with this particular Cabinet Lekgotla without the NEC having convened a Lekgotla of its own, which is going to be rather interesting because all political formations go into this Lekgotla of cabinet for the very first time with this conglomerate of political formations that are 9 of them that are part, or 7 of them that are part of the executive of the country, to chart a way forward for the line of march where the president will ultimately deliver the State of the Nation address next week in the opening of Parliament.
You know, Samkele, you make a very interesting point when it comes to the issues of mandates, because we know during the Lekgotla, normally, of course, this is uncharted waters with the GNU, the policies as well as priorities. This is actually where they are tabled and considered for the passing into law by the various departments as well as the DNGs that will be in attendance. So what can we expect in this regard? People going there without mandates. We've been speaking, as I referred to earlier on, to some ministers who have been very cagey about what it is that they are actually going to table when they go to this Lekgotla, taking into account, Samkele, that in some portfolios as well as departments now, you are seeing 3 different parties that are in charge of a single portfolio.
The truth of the matter and the reality of it is that political formations may have their manifestos, they can design them, they can be as beautiful as they want, speak the most flowery language, promise you heaven and earth, but those manifestos, when it comes to the implementation of government, are just a piece of paper that is gathering dust somewhere, because ultimately the people who implement these perspectives of this vision of a country are the director generals. It's the bureaucrats who implement them. And if a bureaucrat does not particularly believe in a political formation's ideological perspective, they may not pursue that particular vision and do what is effectively right and effectively right for the citizens of this country. And as the president ultimately says, time for politics, time for manifestos are now out the window. What is ultimately more important is the prosperity of this company called South Africa, and for Project South Africa to ultimately succeed. So those statements that you've been seeing of Dean McPherson, the Minister of Public Works, and ultimately the former Minister of Public Works, Patricia de Lille, I expect the President to read them the riot act, that ultimately you are in the behest serving in this cabinet on my behalf, as the presidential prerogative is with me to appoint you or to de-appoint you. So ultimately, he will give them a line of march on how government communication works, and the plethora of statements that we are seeing from ministers and former ministers will ultimately be put to a stop in this Lekgotla that will take place, where the president will ultimately give his ministers the line of march, and also the free-for-all that you've been seeing cabinet ministers doing willy-nilly as they like will ultimately take time. I saw a post by one former government communicator, Mlimandlela Ndamasa, who spoke about how ministers nowadays just rush to the media and don't take time to understand the workings of their departments, to understand the Director General, the Deputy Director Generals that they work with, and they just jump and speak without totally knowing what is being done by the department, by the functionaries of the department, because politicians are not functionaries in a department. Politicians are there for political oversight and for direction, but not to do the actual work. So you can't find a politician directing a Director General, appoint so and so for this service that they need to render, or for this particular tender, because that then speaks to overreach by politicians.
You know, Samkele, a very interesting aspect of this, because when you mentioned the fact that a lot of ministers have been running to the media, professing many things, and we actually have to sit here and wonder, but this sounds more like something that was contained within their manifesto. Is this now what they're going to come and push through as part of course, the GNU? And so it's going to be very difficult and also interesting to see if the people that have been appointed in these positions are actually going to get rid of that party towing line, I don't know what to call it, in their head, or narrative in their head, to say, you know what, you've been appointed by the president to come and do due diligence under a certain mandate. So do you foresee these people actually succeeding at getting rid or shedding their party skin and actually just fully engrossing themselves into the fact that, you know what, you're not speaking for the DA, you're not speaking for the ANC, you're speaking for the government of national unity?
The reality of the matter is that the ministers that have been appointed and the political parties in the GNU, in particular the two biggest political parties, the ANC and the DA, have failed to do that, because you see the ANC posting its ministers or its chairpersons of portfolio committees as their deployees. You go to the Democratic Alliance, it's perceived as if this is a DA executive, members of the executive, Sifiwe Garuba, Solimalatsi, and John Steenhuisen, who are ultimately ministers, Dean McPherson, being painted as these executive members of the DA, as opposed to being members of the executive of South Africa. So
that's
both
true.
The ANC, the DA, and ultimately, let me put in the PA as well. They are ultimately to blame as well, because Gayton has been very vocal in his particular appointment in the Department of Sports and Arts and Culture. And let me not say and point it as if it is wrong. It's not wrong. Ultimately, they are in the political game. We are heading into the local government elections. So political parties and their deployees in government now will want to use these particular portfolios that they are given in order to push through their work, their manifestos, in order to appeal to the electorate come the 2026 local government elections, where these municipalities, ultimately all of them, will be ultimately up for grabs. You look at a province like KwaZulu-Natal, the IFP is smiling from ear to ear, because they've got COGTA nationally, they've got COGTA provincially in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, so they've got access to all of these municipalities within that particular province, which was ultimately meaning that the province is up for grabs for them. And it is up to their deployees in government, their deputy president, who is there at Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, or their president who's at Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, to make sure that they pull through in whatever that they want to achieve in government.
In closing, Samkele, a very quick one. I mean, we know this Cabinet Lekgotla is going to be sitting over 2 days, and of course the president will give us the report back, or the outcomes of that. So take us through that. When can we expect the report back from the president?
We ultimately won't get a report back from the president on the Cabinet Lekgotla, but what we will get is the minister in the president, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, who will speak ultimately on the outcomes of the Cabinet Lekgotla. But the most important thing to look at in this Cabinet Lekgotla is the economic trajectory of the country. Where does the president see the country going, knowing that now he's working with this conglomerate of political formations? Which economic policies does he seek to achieve? How does he infuse the views of the Democratic Alliance, the views of the Inkatha Freedom Party, the views of Rise Mzansi, the views of all these other political formations like your Patriotic Alliance, and their colored constituency, which is largely left out in the doldrums and does not receive service delivery either from the ANC in Gauteng or the DA in in the Western Cape. Then you go to the marginalized black community in Gugulethu, in Khayelitsha. You come to Soweto, to Orange Farm, to Umlazi, to KwaMashu, and the rural areas which are disenfranchised and are not getting proper services. You look at the rearrangement of the metro, like eThekwini, the bringing in of a seasoned politician and former MEC within that particular province, that would be Cyril Xaba, in that municipality that has been destroyed by the ANC. So we must look at the economic trajectory, look at the proposed nuclear power station, and how the Minister of Electricity and Energy, Dr. Hosienzo Ramokgopa, wants to push through that particular funding model from Treasury and Enoch Godongwana.